Hello and welcome back to Biology for Beginners. As always, I'm your host, Morgan. I do apologize for the lack of Bio for Beginners the last couple of weeks. One week I did already warn you we probably weren't gonna have it because of finals and, well, finals haven't happened yet, but I had my second round of midterm, but I did have final projects that I'm sort of done with at this point. You're not my real mom. Stop asking questions. So, today we continue on with Biology for Beginners and we're jumping into Chapter 8. This is our first video of Unit 2 and we are talking about cell division. Specifically, this is just kind of an intro to cell division. This video is going to be a little bit shorter because I decided that mitosis deserves its own video, so I cut things up a bit. But we're going to introduce cell division and talk a little bit about binary fission today. As always, we have the terms and definition slides popping up right now so that you can pause the video and grab the vocabulary we will be using today so you can understand the things that I'm saying without me reading the definitions to you. Also, a quick reminder that my PDFs of all of my Biology for Beginners slides, as well as any supplemental material that I put together, is available for absolutely free on my Patreon, which is linked down in the description below. If you are a patron, however, you do get this stuff about a day early, give or take a few hours, based on if I remember to make it available or not. So without further ado, let's jump into the topic of cell division. The first question we might have about cells in this whole thing is, how do cells reproduce? Well, that's going to be through a process known as cell division, which is basically where a parent cell copies its chromosomes, copies its DNA, which is stored on those chromosomes, then splits into two genetically identical daughter cells. So if we look at the very, very basic diagram here on my slide, you have that kind of teal color parent cell, and then it splits after copying its DNA into those little pink magenta-y color daughter cells. It's very simple. That's what you really need to understand at the most base level of cell division. You have a parent cell that then splits into two daughter cells when it is time. Now, once this split happens, once the cells start growing again and get to the point where they're going to split, they do then become, each one of them becomes a parent cell that will then split into two more daughter cells, so on and so forth. So every time you get more cells, you multiply by 2. So these 2 cells will become 4, those 4 will become 8, blah, 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 blah. That's how it works. And this form of reproduction through cell division is a form of asexual reproduction. So basically, asexual reproduction results in a clone of the original organism, which means that the offspring are genetically identical to the parent. And this is the form of reproduction that many single-cell organisms use. And specifically, they reproduce asexually through cell division. You see this a lot in not only prokaryotes like bacteria, but also the single-cell eukaryotic organisms like yeast, which the little image we have here of the cell reproducing asexually is yeast. But reproduction through these asexual means is not unique to only single-cell organisms. We also see some multicellular organisms with the ability to reproduce asexually. Specifically in this image we have here, you'll see the sea star. Now, sea stars are kind of cool because if like an arm is removed and there's enough of the material from the central part of the sea star, a whole new sea star can form. And that is a form of asexual reproduction. You get 2 organisms then, the younger one being genetically identical to the original organism. But I mean, this is not unique just to sea stars. Asexual reproduction is seen quite a bit in the plant world. For example, succulents. I'm sure many people know that if you take cuttings of them, a lot of times they will grow roots, you'll get a new plant. I have a succulent in my kitchen that I need to take some cuttings of to give to my younger cousin because she's craving a succulent. But this is just a form of reproduction that does not require two sets of genetic material. It basically creates clones. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more in future videos, but for the purposes of today, the thing you really need to understand is that cell division is one form of asexual reproduction. Now, to go on a quick aside before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the form of cell division we're going to talk about today, we're going to discuss very briefly sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction requires some form of gametes, so sperm and egg. And the big thing about sexual reproduction is it produces genetically unique offspring with a little asterisk. Yes, you can get like identical twins, triplets, blah, 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 that will be identical to one another. But the point here is that they are not identical to the parents. Even though twins may be identical to each other, they are not identical to the parents. They are still genetically unique from that generation one. And so sexual reproduction does in general produce more variation than asexual reproduction. So in general, organisms with the ability to reproduce sexually do have an advantage over those that produce asexually because of that genetic variation within the populations. So my little very, very basic diagram here at the bottom of this slide, you see that the blue sphere and the red sphere, if they were to produce sexually, they would have a completely unique offspring represented by the purple sphere. So that's all we're really going to say about sexual reproduction today, since this is not what this video is about, and we will get into sexual reproduction in later videos. Today, we're going to focus on a form of cell division known as binary fission. And like I said, this is a form of cell division, and what binary fission means, it means dividing in half, which is exactly what these cells are doing. And this particular form of cell division is how prokaryotes reproduce, so things like bacteria. And before we really move into what the steps of this whole process is, we need to note that prokaryotes carry their DNA on a single looped chromosome. So organisms like humans, dogs, so you and me, our DNA is going to be in that kind of like X shape that you're probably used to seeing. That's not the case for prokaryotes. One of the things about their whole simplicity is that their DNA is all in one single chromosome, but it's in a loop. And if you were to kind of cut that loop and stretch it out, the chromosome may be many times larger than the organism itself. So one example is that the E. coli chromosome is going to be about 500 times larger than the cell that contains it. So this whole binary fission process is still pretty complicated, even though it is going to be the most simple form of cell division that we talk about in the videos talking about cell division. Step one is that the chromosome and the DNA contained in it is going to be duplicated. So you go from that cell with the one kind of purple spaghetti looking looped chromosome to the cell that has kind of two purple spaghetti looking looped chromosomes. And you'll notice that one is kind of more on one side and one is more on the other. And that's important because as step two here starts, the chromosomes do separate to those opposite ends of the cell while the cell starts to elongate. This elongation is important because once that cell reaches about double in the original size here in step three, the plasma membrane is going to begin to pinch inward, and then more cell wall is going to be made, and the two new cells will be able to be kind of popped apart. So two new cells are effectively created through this process. And a quick recap of this whole process, which again is a very simple form of cell division. You get that duplication of the chromosome. The chromosomes begin to move to either side of the cell while the cell starts to elongate. And then you get that pinching off of the plasma membrane and more cell wall being formed. Remember, prokaryotic organisms do have cell walls, so it does make dividing a little more complicated. However, the big thing that's going to separate how binary fission works versus how like plant cells go about their division is right here, but we will talk about that in the next video when we talk about mitosis. Mitosis is kind of the next step up from this process. It's a little bit more in depth, a little bit more happens because eukaryotic cells are more complicated than prokaryotic cells. So binary fission is kind of the thing that laid the groundwork for other modes of cell division. So again, binary fission is how the prokaryotes reproduce. These little single cell organisms reproduce through cell division. With little asterisks, I know there's going to be weird things that happen and life is messy, but for our purposes, prokaryotes reproduce by binary fission. Binary fission is a very simple form of cell division, and it's going to be similar to how eukaryotic cells divide, but again, more simple. So one more overview, you have that loopy spaghetti-like chromosome duplicate, the cell elongates while those two chromosomes separate to the two ends of the cell. The plasma membrane begins to pinch off, more cell wall is formed, bing bam boom, you end up with two lovely brand new cells that are genetically identical to the parent cell. And I know this has been a short one, but that's all I have for you today. We've gotten through binary fission. Next week, we're going to talk about mitosis. That video might be a little bit long because I predict that I'm going to ramble on because mitosis is exciting, mitosis is cool, and if you don't think that, I think you're wrong. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, night, afternoon, what have you. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I know my photosynthesis video, I had someone let me know in the comments that it helped them with their studying, and that really did mean a lot to me because my whole goal here is to help people that think biology is hard have something to help them study. So it does mean a lot to me if you do let me know if this helps you. But I will see you all in the next one. Thank you again for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell if you would like to see more. And if you'd like to follow me on any of my other social medias, the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to check out thereptilegoth.com for all of my articles and blog posts. If you found any value in this video and you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon page. That link is also in the description down below. And a special thanks goes out to my Diamond Dragon patron, Diane B. What you're doing is really helping me fund a dream here. I will see you guys all in the next one.